Before I tell you what happened to me, I need you to understand something. This isn't just another creepy story. This is real. This happened. And if you've ever found yourself thinking there's no way a place like this could hold any real danger, trust me, you couldn't be more wrong. Charlie's department store had been around for decades. A fixture in the town. The kind of place where everything was familiar, comfortably so. The aisles stacked with dusty shelves, the old elevator with its metal doors that screeched every time they opened. If you'd asked anyone who worked there, they'd tell you it was just another department store. Not much to see, not much to feel. But something about that place never sat right with me. I'd brushed it off in the beginning, telling myself it was just an old building. But after what I saw, I'll never be able to explain what happened the way I want to. And frankly, I don't think anyone would believe me if I did. I worked the night shift. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses down on you until you feel like you're suffocating. And after hours, it got even worse. You could almost hear the store, breathing. I know that sounds crazy, but trust me, the air felt thick, like something was always hanging just out of sight. I spent nights walking those aisles, checking the floors, making sure everything was in place. A simple job. Or so I thought. The first time I saw it, I didn't think much of it. Just another customer wandering in during the dead of night, looking for who knows what. A tall man, dressed in a ragged winter coat despite it being the middle of summer. His eyes were hollow, black, without a glint of life. I called out to him, asked if he needed help, but he didn't respond. I walked up to him, getting closer, and that's when I felt it. A chill, deep in my bones. It wasn't the cold air in the store, it was something more, direct. Like a presence. Something watching. Something that didn't belong. He never blinked. Not once. Just stood there, staring ahead like he was waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was just being paranoid. I worked long hours. Maybe I was just tired. But then, the next night, it happened again. And the night after that. And the night after that. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. But then things got stranger. The customers, or whatever they were, kept showing up. The same ones. Same odd behaviors. They never spoke, never interacted. They just wandered through the store, like they were looking for something that didn't exist. The lights flickered. The air turned cold, almost freezing, in the middle of the summer heat. But the creepiest part? No one ever left. They'd come in, walk around, and disappear into the shadows. And I was left to wonder, where did they go? I know, this sounds like the setup to any other ghost story, right? The haunted department store with its strange figures lurking in the dark corners. But I'm telling you, what I saw wasn't just some figment of my imagination. It wasn't just my tired eyes playing tricks on me. No. What was happening at Charlie's was something far worse. I couldn't have known then how deep this thing went. How dangerous it really was. And that's where this story begins. You see, Charlie's wasn't just any old store. There was something in its history that no one wanted to talk about. Something tied to the land it was built on, something people in the town whispered about, but no one ever dared to speak openly. There were stories. Stories of people disappearing in the nearby woods, of things that should never be seen, of creatures that should never be believed in. Wendigos. I didn't know what a Wendigo was back then. I didn't care. I just wanted to get through the night shift and go home. But then, on the fourth night of my shift, things changed. And I realized. I wasn't just dealing with the strange customers. I wasn't just dealing with an old, run-down department store. I was dealing with something far older. Something much darker. And it was using Charlie's department store as its hunting ground. What happened that night, changed everything. And I'll never forget it. Before we get into the full details of what happened that night, make sure you're subscribed. Turn on the notification bell because you don't want to miss what's coming next. Trust me, the rest of this story is something you have to hear. It was the summer of 2012 when I started working the night shift at Charlie's department store. At first, it seemed like any other retail job. I'd clock in around 10 p.m., make my rounds, and wait for the shift to end at 6 a.m. The customers were mostly regulars, older folks buying the same things: cleaning supplies, canned food, clothes. It was the kind of place where people didn't come for excitement. They came because it was safe, familiar. The smell of dust and aged wood always hung in the air, like a forgotten relic of another time. The first few weeks were easy enough. I'd walk the long aisles, check the stock, make sure the registers were locked up. The store had this old-fashioned layout, kind of a maze of corridors with rows upon rows of shelves that stretched on forever. The store was big, almost too big for the small town it was in. And you could never shake the feeling that the place was more than just a building. There were spots where the air would get cold. Not your typical refrigerated section cold, but a deeper chill. I thought I was just tired, or maybe it was the weird hours. But now, looking back, I think it was something else. Something that wasn't part of the store at all. Most of the time, the nights were uneventful. But the store had its quirks. It was old, and it creaked and groaned as if the building itself was alive. Every step I took would send a small ripple through the dusty air. The floorboards would creak beneath my feet, and the overhead lights would flicker, casting strange shadows on the walls. But what got to me most was how quiet it was at night. It was the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl. The kind of quiet where every sound, no matter how small, felt amplified. You'd hear things. Little noises you couldn't explain, like the shuffle of footsteps or whispers in the back aisle, but when you went to check, there was never anyone there. I tried to brush it off. I really did. It's just an old building, I'd tell myself. But then, things started to happen that I couldn't ignore. One night, as I was walking through the aisles, I noticed something out of place. It was near the back corner of the store, by the old electronics section. There was a man standing in the middle of the aisle. Tall, gaunt, with a long, frayed coat despite the summer heat. His skin was unnaturally pale, and his eyes were unnerving. Hollow, dark, like he wasn't entirely there. I thought he was just another lost customer. But when I asked if he needed help, he didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at me with that unblinking, unsettling gaze. It didn't make sense. No one ever came in that late for anything serious. And I'd never seen him before. But I chalked it up to the strange hours. I told myself he was just someone who had wandered in from the cold, maybe lost, maybe confused. He didn't look like the usual crowd. I moved closer to him, trying to break the silence. I called out again. "Can I help you find something?" But he didn't respond. His eyes just followed me, never blinking. It was as if he was waiting for something. As if he was waiting for me to move closer. It was only then that I noticed how still he was. He wasn't breathing, not like a normal person. And his skin, it wasn't just pale. It was as though it had been stretched too tightly over his bones. Like he wasn't supposed to be there. I took a step back, suddenly feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I should have left right then. I should have called the police. But for some reason, I didn't. I wasn't thinking straight. I just turned away, but not before I heard him say something. A low, gravelly voice, almost a whisper, but sharp enough to make me freeze in my tracks. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You don't belong." I turned back around, but he was gone. I looked down the aisle, nothing. The lights overhead flickered, then went out for a moment, casting the store into complete darkness. I swear, I heard something moving in the shadows, but when the lights came back on, there was nothing. No man. No strange figure. Just an empty aisle, untouched. I knew then that something was wrong. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it at the time, but something inside me told me to be careful. This place, it wasn't just a store. It wasn't just a job. There was something in that building, something ancient, that I wasn't supposed to see. Something that had been watching, waiting. And soon, it wouldn't just be customers wandering in from the streets. It wouldn't just be late-night shoppers looking for bargains. No, something far older would come through those doors, and when it did, I'd be caught in its path. It wasn't long after that night that I started to hear more things. At first, it was just the small sounds, faint whispers echoing through the halls. Then, there were the knocks. At first, I thought it was just a prank, but the knocking kept getting louder. Coming from different areas of the store. It sounded like it was coming from the walls. From behind the shelves. And each time I checked, there was nothing there. I couldn't find a thing. I decided to stay late one night, to try and catch whatever was causing all this. I wanted answers. I had to know. And that's when it happened. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought I saw a shadow moving at the end of the aisle. I thought it was just a trick of the light. But as I walked closer, I saw it again. There, at the far end, just standing in the dark corner. But this time, it wasn't just any person. It wasn't a customer. No. This was something different. It was tall. Too tall. Its limbs, they twisted, bent at odd angles, like they didn't belong. Its face. I couldn't even make out the features at first. But when it stepped closer, when the light caught its face just right, I saw it. Its skin was stretched too tight over its bones. Its eyes were wide, almost too wide. Empty. Black. And its mouth, oh God, its mouth, was filled with sharp, jagged teeth, as if it hadn't eaten in years. This thing, wasn't a human at all. It wasn't even close. I knew then that this was no ordinary customer. And it was far too late for me to leave. Whatever was happening at Charlie's, whatever I was facing, was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just a store. This wasn't just a job. This was a nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. That thing, standing there in the corner of the store, its eyes wide and empty, its skin stretched tight over its bones. I didn't want to believe it. But I knew, deep down, that it wasn't just some hallucination or trick of the light. I had to face the truth, something else was in that store, and it wasn't leaving anytime soon. The next few days were a blur. I was exhausted, but I kept coming back to work. Maybe I was hoping I'd see something that would make sense of it all, something to explain what I'd witnessed. But the more I stayed there, the more real it all became. And soon, it wasn't just shadows in the corner or cold spots in the air. It was the customers. At first, they were just strange in the way most late-night shoppers are. Quiet, subdued, and maybe a little too eager to get their shopping done quickly. But it wasn't long before I realized that these weren't ordinary people. They didn't act like normal customers. It was as if they were moving through the store like they were looking for something that wasn't supposed to be there. One evening, a woman came in. She was tall, almost unnaturally so, and dressed in a long, faded blue coat that looked far too old for the season. She had short, dark hair that framed her face, but her eyes. God, her eyes. They were the first thing I noticed. Dark, almost black, with no life in them. She walked slowly down the aisle, her gaze fixed straight ahead, as though she was following something invisible. I watched her for a while, feeling that same uneasy chill crawl up my spine. She didn't pick up anything from the shelves, didn't even seem to be looking at the items. She just walked. And every time I checked on her, she was moving closer to the back of the store, closer to that section near the electronics, where I'd seen that thing, the creature, standing. I approached her cautiously, hoping to snap her out of whatever trance she was in. I called to her, asking if she needed any help. She didn't respond. Not at first. But then, when I got closer, she turned her head slowly, so slowly, as if it took her all her strength to do it. And when she looked at me, it wasn't just cold. It was empty. Like there was no one there at all. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't human, not in the way I understood it. She was something else, something hollow. I asked her again, "Ma'am, are you all right?" But this time, she didn't speak. She didn't even blink. Instead, she reached out and grabbed my wrist, her fingers icy cold. I tried to pull away, but it was like her grip was glued to my skin. And then she whispered something, just a few words. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was raspy, dry, like it hadn't been used in years. And then she let go. Just like that. She turned away and walked off, disappearing down the aisle, moving with that same unnatural calm. I didn't know what to make of it. It was like the store itself was pulling these strange people in. At first, I thought maybe I was just losing it, working too many long hours. But after that night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The customers weren't just behaving oddly. They were different. They were wrong. I started to notice it more often after that. A man would come in, dressed in a tattered jacket and jeans, the kind of clothing that didn't fit the season. He'd wander through the store, muttering to himself under his breath. I couldn't hear everything, but every now and then, I'd catch pieces of his words. Things like, "Not for long. They'll take it. They'll take everything." But when I'd approach him to ask if he needed help, he'd look at me like I wasn't even there. His eyes would be wild, and his lips would curl into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was unsettling, to say the least. And again, when I'd walk away, I'd hear the soft sound of him whispering, like he was talking to someone invisible beside him. Talking to something. Then there were the others, the ones who didn't speak at all. They just came in and walked the aisles with this strange sense of purpose. Like they were searching for something. They'd pass right by me without even acknowledging my presence, and then disappear into the back of the store. But no matter how many times I checked, they were never there when I went to look. It was as if they'd vanished. And every time I turned away, I'd feel like I was being watched, like someone was following me, just out of sight. I started to question everything. Why were these customers acting so strangely? What were they looking for? And why did it always feel like they were drawn to the back of the store, to that dark corner where I'd seen the creature lurking? I couldn't help but wonder, was it all connected? Was this something that had been going on for years? It wasn't just the customers. It was the feeling that came over me each time I worked the late shift. Like the store itself had a pulse, a presence that was constantly shifting and changing. Sometimes the lights would flicker, sometimes the air would get too still, like it was holding its breath. And then there were the whispers. At first, I thought it was my imagination playing tricks on me. But after a while, I couldn't ignore them anymore. They came from everywhere, the walls, the ceilings, the aisles. Soft, unintelligible murmurs that never made sense. And every time I tried to make sense of them, they would grow louder, more insistent. Like they were calling to me. Taunting me. I knew I had to find out what was going on. I had to figure out what was happening in that store. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I couldn't ignore the fact that something was wrong. But every time I tried to dig deeper, the more I felt like I was being drawn into something much larger than myself. Something I wasn't supposed to understand. And the worst part? The customers, they weren't the only ones who seemed to be changing. It was me, too. The longer I stayed in that place, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Like I was becoming one of them. Like I was being drawn into whatever dark force had taken root inside those walls. I was no longer just a witness to the strange events at Charlie's department store. I was a part of it. And I didn't know how to escape. I couldn't shake the feeling that the store was alive. Every corner, every shelf, seemed to pulse with some dark, unseen force. It wasn't just the customers anymore. It wasn't just the cold spots or the strange noises in the night. I could feel something watching me, and it wasn't just my imagination. Something was growing inside Charlie's, and I was caught right in the middle of it. I had no idea how I was supposed to deal with it or if there even was a way out. It started with the lights. I thought I was losing my mind the first time it happened. I'd been checking the back storage room, one of the dimmest parts of the store, when the lights suddenly flickered and went out. I was used to the occasional glitch, but this wasn't like anything I'd experienced before. The lights didn't just flicker. They shut off completely, leaving me in total darkness for a few seconds. I reached for my flashlight, trying to calm myself, but before I even turned it on, I heard something. A scraping noise. Low and slow, like fingernails dragging across metal. I froze. My heart was racing, but I didn't move. My flashlight was shaking in my hands, but I couldn't bring myself to use it. Something told me if I turned on the light, I would see it. Whatever it was. And I wasn't ready to see it yet. So, I stood there, in that pitch-black storage room, listening to that scraping sound. It was getting closer. And with each passing second, the air felt heavier. Like the walls were closing in on me. Then, without warning, the lights snapped back on. I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet felt frozen to the floor. And when I looked around, there was nothing. Nothing that could explain the sound. No one there. Just the shelves full of empty boxes. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been right behind me, breathing down my neck. I turned and ran out of that room faster than I'd ever run in my life. I didn't stop until I was back out on the main floor, back in the open where I could breathe. I should have left that night. I should have called someone. Told them what was happening. But instead, I stayed. I stayed because part of me believed that if I just kept working, if I kept going through the motions, I could pretend it wasn't happening. But that's not how this works. That's not how they work. The next night, I started to notice the cold. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones and doesn't leave. I'd be walking through the aisles, making my usual rounds, and suddenly, the temperature would drop, just like that. And not a little bit. It would feel like I had walked into a freezer. But the air didn't feel like air anymore. It was thick, almost oppressive. The cold wasn't just physical. It felt like it was coming from deep inside the walls, like the store was breathing. And then, I heard it again, the whispering. Soft, barely audible at first, but it was there. In the air. Around me. I couldn't understand what it was saying, but I could feel the words. It was like they were being pressed into my mind, one after another. The more I listened, the clearer the whispers became, but they weren't words anymore. They were commands. Orders. Telling me to do things. Telling me to stay. I tried to ignore it. I thought maybe I was hearing things. Maybe it was just the stress of the job getting to me. But when I started hearing footsteps behind me, footsteps that didn't belong to anyone else, I couldn't deny it anymore. I wasn't alone in that store. Not in the way I thought I was. And that's when I saw him again. The man from before. The tall one. The one I'd seen standing in the aisle. I thought maybe it was just another customer, but this time, I knew it wasn't. He was standing there, in the same spot where I'd seen him last time, but this time, he wasn't just staring at nothing. His mouth was open, and he was whispering, or at least, I thought he was. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Just, a feeling. A deep, bone-chilling sensation, like his words were crawling inside my head. I walked closer, despite every instinct in my body telling me not to. And that's when I saw it. The thing I had been avoiding. The thing I didn't want to believe was real. I saw his eyes. And they weren't eyes. They were black holes. Dark, empty voids that seemed to suck in every bit of light around them. And his skin, it wasn't just pale anymore. It was gray, like ash. Like it had been drained of all life. He wasn't breathing, but I could feel his presence, suffocating the air around me. I turned and ran, no hesitation this time. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I didn't care if the customers saw me. I just needed to get out of that store, out of that place. But no matter how fast I ran, I could still feel it, his eyes on me. I could hear the whispers in the distance, growing louder with every step. The store itself was closing in on me. That's when I realized the truth. Charlie's department store wasn't just a building. It was a trap. A prison. And the worst part was that I was already a part of it. There was no way out. The store had already claimed me. And no matter what I did, I wasn't leaving until it wanted me to. The worst part? It wasn't just the store that was alive. It wasn't just the strange customers or the supernatural cold. The worst part was the fact that I had started to change. The longer I worked there, the more I could feel it. A pull, deep inside me. A connection to something darker than I could understand. And I knew, deep down, that I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one who was going to be trapped here. But I wasn't ready to face that yet. Not fully. Not until the store decided I was. I tried to tell myself that maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was just exhausted, seeing things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew better. And the longer I stayed in that store, the more I realized that whatever was happening wasn't something I could explain away. It wasn't something I could run from. It was a force, and it had its sights set on me. The next few days were a blur. I went to work every shift, even though every part of me screamed to quit. To leave and never look back. But something kept me coming back. Maybe it was the fear of what would happen if I didn't. Maybe it was the fact that I couldn't escape the feeling that the store was somehow waiting for me to do something. But I stayed. And with each passing shift, I saw more. The first time I saw him again, I was in the aisles near the back of the store. It was late, around 2 a.m., and I was the only one there. I thought I heard someone moving behind me, and when I turned, I saw him. That same man, standing still in the middle of the aisle, staring at nothing. He looked wrong. His eyes were deeper, darker than I remembered, like they were swallowing all the light around them. His skin was ashen, stretched tight against his bones. But what hit me hardest was the way he was standing, like he was waiting for something. Like he was waiting for me. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at him, frozen in place. It felt like hours, but I'm sure it was only seconds. Something inside me told me to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. And then, finally, he spoke. He didn't say much. But when he did, his voice was like ice, scraping against my nerves. "It's already too late," he whispered. "You should have left when you had the chance." And then, without warning, he turned and walked into the shadows of the aisle, disappearing from sight. I didn't follow. I couldn't. All I could do was stand there, my heart hammering in my chest, knowing deep down that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I tried to shake it off. I kept telling myself that it was just another hallucination, just another product of too much stress and too little sleep. But that didn't explain what happened the next night. I was on the floor, restocking some shelves in the electronics section, when I felt it again, the cold. This time, it was worse. The air felt like it was freezing, like someone had opened the door to the outside in the middle of winter. And that's when I saw it. Just at the edge of my vision, I saw movement, something shifting in the shadows near the back wall. I turned, expecting to see another customer, but there was no one there. But the shadows, they weren't shadows. They were moving. They were alive. I swear to you, I saw them twitching, as if something was crawling just beneath the surface. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I felt rooted to the floor, like the store itself was pulling me deeper into its web. And then, I heard the whispering again. But this time, it wasn't in my head. It was, around me. All around me. The words were clearer now, like they were coming from every corner of the store at once. "Don't leave," the whispers said. "Stay with us." The voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, like it was rising up from the walls themselves. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get out. I grabbed my jacket, slammed the door behind me, and sprinted to my car. I don't think I've ever driven faster in my life. I don't even remember the drive home. All I could think about was the feeling of them, the eyes on me. Watching me. Waiting. It wasn't just the man with the dark eyes. It wasn't just the strange customers. It was the store itself. I was becoming part of it. And I knew, deep down, that I wasn't leaving anytime soon. The next day, I went back to work. I don't know why I did. Maybe it was the fear of what would happen if I didn't. Maybe I was too terrified to quit. But I knew something had changed. The store was different. There was a heaviness in the air, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. The lights flickered more than usual, casting long, jagged shadows on the walls. And that's when I saw it again. It was just before closing time, and I was heading down the hall toward the employee break room when I saw her. A woman, standing in the middle of the hallway. She was wearing a long black dress, her hair falling in front of her face, but she didn't look like a normal person. Her skin was pale, sickly, almost translucent. And she was crying. But it wasn't the sound of a human cry. It was something else. Something wrong. The sound scraped against my eardrums, making my whole body shiver. I tried to call out to her, but when I did, she stopped crying and turned to face me. Her eyes were black. Not just dark, but completely empty. Like there was nothing behind them at all. I backed away, but the moment I turned, I heard her voice. Soft, cold, and hollow. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." The words hung in the air, an echo that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't run. I couldn't move. It was like the very air in the store was holding me in place, locking me there. And that's when I realized, the store wasn't just some haunted building. It wasn't just a place where bad things happened. It was a living thing. And it was feeding on me, just like it had fed on everyone who had come before me. The customers weren't just customers. They were part of it. And I was too. I had been from the moment I stepped inside. I tried to scream. But no sound came out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was suffocating. And in that moment, I knew, there was no escape. Not for me. Not for anyone who walked through those doors. I wasn't just trapped in the store. The store had become a part of me. That realization hit me harder than anything else. This wasn't just about strange customers or eerie whispers anymore. This wasn't just about cold spots or flickering lights. The store itself was alive. And whatever was happening to me wasn't just happening around me, it was happening inside me. I could feel it, like a weight pressing on my chest. Like something I couldn't escape, no matter how far I ran. I don't know what kept me coming back to work after that. Maybe I was too scared to quit. Maybe I was too far gone already. But part of me knew there was no leaving, not really. The store wouldn't let me go. Not until it was done with me. And it wasn't done yet. The night it happened started like any other. The shifts had all started to blur together at that point, just endless hours of pacing the aisles, listening to the creaks and groans of the old floorboards, waiting for something to go wrong. The tension never left me. It was always there, crawling under my skin, making every sound, every shadow feel like a threat. But that night was different. It was just past midnight when I heard it. A sound I'll never forget. It started as a low rumble, like thunder rolling through the building, shaking the shelves and rattling the lights overhead. At first, I thought it was just the old pipes acting up again. But then it grew louder. Closer. It wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from the floor. I stood there, frozen in place, as the sound moved through the store, like something massive was crawling beneath the surface. The floorboards trembled beneath my feet, and I could feel the vibrations rising up through my legs. It felt like the whole building was alive, like it was waking up. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was heavy, suffocating, as if the air itself was waiting for something to happen. That's when I heard the scratching. At first, it was faint, like claws scraping against wood. But it grew louder, more frantic, like something was trying to get out. It was coming from one of the aisles near the back of the store, the same aisle where I'd seen the man with the dark eyes. I didn't want to go back there. Every part of me was screaming to stay away. But something pulled me. Something I couldn't fight. I made my way to the back of the store, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The scratching was louder now, almost deafening, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. When I turned the corner, I saw it. The shelf near the back wall was shaking, the boxes and cans rattling violently as if something was pounding against it from the other side. I couldn't see what was causing it. But I could feel it. Whatever it wasn't human. And then, before I could react, the shelf exploded outward, sending boxes and cans flying in every direction. I stumbled back, barely keeping my balance, as a massive, shadowy figure stepped out from the darkness. It was taller than any human, its limbs impossibly long and twisted, its face hidden in the shadows. But its eyes were unmistakable. They were the same hollow, black voids I'd seen before. And they were locked on me. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in its gaze, as it took a step toward me. Then another. Its movements were slow, deliberate, like it was savoring the moment. And as it got closer, I saw its face. Its skin was gray and cracked, like old leather stretched too thin. Its mouth was filled with jagged, yellow teeth, and when it opened, a foul stench filled the air, like rot and decay. It let out a low, rumbling growl, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to make it out. I wasn't just trapped in the store. I was trapped with it. And there was no one coming to save me. I don't know what made me move. Maybe it was pure instinct, or maybe it was the realization that standing still meant certain death. But somehow, I managed to turn and run. I bolted down the aisle, my heart pounding in my chest, the sound of the creature's footsteps echoing behind me. It was faster than I expected, its long limbs giving it an unnatural speed. I could feel it closing in, its growls growing louder, more feral, as it chased me through the store. I rounded a corner, my legs burning with exhaustion, and dove behind one of the shelves, trying to catch my breath. The store was eerily silent again, but I knew it was still there. I could feel its presence, like a weight pressing down on me. I peeked around the corner, and that's when I saw it. It was standing just a few feet away, its back to me, its massive frame hunched over as it sniffed the air. It was hunting me. I knew I couldn't stay hidden for long. It would find me eventually. And when it did, there would be no escape. So, I made a decision. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy metal rod from one of the shelves, and stepped out from my hiding spot. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I thought I could fight it. But I didn't have a choice. It turned toward me, its empty eyes locking onto mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, it lunged. I swung the rod as hard as I could, striking it across the face. It stumbled back, letting out a deafening roar that shook the entire store. But it didn't stop. It came at me again, faster this time, its claws swiping through the air, narrowly missing my head. I swung again, aiming for its legs, and this time, it fell. But as it hit the ground, it let out a sound that chilled me to my core, a laugh. Low and guttural, like it was mocking me. Like it knew this wasn't the end. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air, my hands trembling so badly I could barely unlock my car. But even as I drove away, I knew it wasn't over. I knew that whatever was in that store wasn't just going to let me go. And I was right. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was that thing, its black eyes, that horrible, guttural laugh. The thing that attacked me wasn't human. It wasn't anything from this world. I knew that much. But I had to know more. I had to understand what I was dealing with. Because one thing was becoming painfully clear, whatever was happening in that store, it wasn't going to stop. Not until it got what it wanted. And I had a sinking feeling that I was what it wanted. The next day, I couldn't bring myself to go back to work. I stayed at home, pacing around my apartment, trying to make sense of everything. I started doing what I should have done the moment I first stepped into that store. I started researching. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think straight. But the one thing that kept gnawing at the back of my mind was the way that thing had moved, the way its limbs had bent and twisted in ways no human body should. I knew I'd seen something like it before, but I couldn't quite place where. Then, as I searched, it hit me. I found it. The creature in the store wasn't just some random monster. It was a Wendigo. I'd heard the word before. It's one of those old stories, something your grandparents tell you around a campfire. But in my case, it didn't feel like a story. Not anymore. Wendigos are creatures from Algonquin folklore. They're said to be evil spirits, corrupted by greed and hunger. People who get lost in the wild and become consumed by their desire for flesh, they don't die. They transform into these things. Horrible, twisted creatures that crave more than just food. They want everything. And the hunger never ends. The more they feed, the more they become like the thing they've consumed. The Wendigo is always hungry. It's always chasing something, never satisfied. And once it's locked on to you, once it's marked you, there's no escaping it. The more I read, the more I understood. Wendigos aren't just wild animals. They're intelligent. They're patient. They wait. And I was starting to see how the store was part of it. The store itself was just a hunting ground, a place where the Wendigo could feed off the fear, the despair, the people who walked through its doors. But there was something else in the stories I read. Something that sent a chill down my spine. Wendigos have one weakness: they can only be stopped if you destroy their heart. But that's not the part that terrified me. The part that stuck with me was the fact that once you've crossed their path, you don't just have to destroy them, you have to destroy everything they've touched. Every building, every object, every place where their influence has spread. Because if you leave even the smallest trace behind, it comes back. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, that store was the Wendigo's nest. It wasn't just a place it haunted. It was the place it fed, the place it grew stronger. I don't know why it chose Charlie's department store, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't just about scaring people anymore. It was about consuming them, consuming me. The store was feeding off my fear. And when it finally got what it wanted, when it was done with me, I would become just like it. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was the knowledge that there was no way out. I could try to quit, sure. I could never go back to the store again. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't over. The Wendigo wasn't just going to let me walk away. It was going to find me. And when it did, it wouldn't just hunt me, it would turn me into something else. Something unrecognizable. Something that didn't even belong in the world anymore. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I had to go back to the store. I had to confront it. I had to find a way to stop it. But I couldn't do it alone. So I called in some help. I contacted an old friend, someone who had experience with the occult, someone who knew about spirits and dark entities. Someone who could maybe, just maybe, help me figure out how to fight back. It took a while for them to get back to me, but when they did, it was clear that they understood what I was dealing with. They said I had to be careful. The Wendigo wasn't just a creature you could trap or banish with a spell or a chant. It was smarter than that. And the longer it had been feeding, the harder it would be to stop. But they told me one thing that gave me hope, a way to weaken the Wendigo's power. I had to return to the store. I had to find the heart of the Wendigo. And I had to destroy it. But the problem was, how could I even know where the heart was? And how could I even get close to it without becoming its next meal? I spent the next few days preparing, trying to figure out my plan. I had to be smart. I had to be fast. I couldn't go in there unprepared. I started gathering supplies, salt, herbs, anything that might help protect me. And I started asking around. People who had worked there before. People who'd left the store. The more I learned, the more I understood just how deep the store's influence ran. One night, I spoke to a former employee. A man named Jerry, who had worked there for years before quitting suddenly. He was rattled, barely able to speak about it. But after some coaxing, he finally told me something that made my blood run cold. He said he'd seen things in the dark corners of the store, things that moved too quickly, that had the wrong eyes. He said he saw the man, the one with the hollow eyes, and that man was always there, always waiting. Jerry said he saw that creature chase someone once. And when they disappeared, the store changed. It changed. He said the store got darker. And that's when he left. I can't blame him. But Jerry also said something else that I couldn't shake. He said that the store wasn't just cursed. It was built on something. A place where the lines between this world and whatever comes after were thinner. And he said the longer you stayed inside, the more you became part of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what Jerry said. I wasn't just going into a haunted store. I was stepping into a place that had already claimed so many. And I wasn't just going to fight a monster. I was going to fight the very thing that made that monster what it was. The hunger, the madness, the darkness. The very thing that the Wendigo had been feeding on for years. I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I was strong enough to face whatever lay ahead. But I knew I had no choice. It was do or die. And if I didn't stop it now, the store would claim me too. I didn't know how much time I had left. I could feel it, deep inside me, gnawing at my mind. The Wendigo was getting stronger. It was pulling me in, whether I liked it or not. The more I resisted, the more I tried to push it out of my head, the more it began to spread, like poison in my veins. It was in my thoughts, in my dreams, in every shadow that moved just a little too quickly. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, felt like the thing was just waiting, watching, ready to pounce. I started noticing things I couldn't ignore anymore. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But the longer I stayed away from the store, the worse it got. My sleep was erratic. I could hear noises in the middle of the night, scratching at my windows, scraping at my door. I would wake up to find objects out of place, things I knew I hadn't touched. I found claw marks on my walls. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia, that I was overthinking things, but deep down, I knew better. The real horror didn't hit me until that night. I was sitting in my living room, staring at the laptop screen, trying to piece together the fragments of the lore I had read. My head was pounding, my eyes blurry from lack of sleep. It was around 3 a.m., and the whole apartment was eerily silent. I had a bad feeling that something wasn't right. Something was wrong. I heard it before I saw it, the scratching. It was faint at first, like nails against the wood, but it grew louder. It came from the hallway outside my room. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest, and I could feel the air around me grow colder, heavier. It was the same noise I had heard in the store, the same frantic scratching, like something was trying to claw its way through the walls. It was closer now. I could feel it. I could hear it moving. But it wasn't outside anymore. It was inside. I got up slowly, not wanting to make a sound. My hands shook as I gripped the flashlight I'd kept by the door. I moved quietly, step by step, until I reached the hallway. The scratching had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. My senses were on high alert, and everything felt like it was about to snap. I turned the corner, and that's when I saw it. There, standing at the end of the hall, was the figure I had hoped never to see again. The same creature, the same Wendigo, standing in the shadows, its eyes burning through the darkness. It was as tall as I remembered. Its limbs were long and spindly, twisted in ways that no human body should be able to move. Its mouth was open, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, yellow and stained. Its skin was cracked and pale, almost translucent in the dim light, and its eyes, those black, hollow eyes, gleaming like nothing I had ever seen before. It was there, in my home, and I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. It took a step forward, and that's when the smell hit me. The rotting stench that seemed to choke the very air around it, like death itself had followed the creature inside. I gagged, trying to turn away, but the thing was too fast. Before I could react, it lunged, and I barely had time to duck behind the doorframe as its claws slashed the air where my head had been just seconds earlier. I could feel the heat radiating from it, the fury in its eyes. It wasn't just hunting me. It was trying to claim me, like it had claimed every other person who'd stepped foot in that store. I don't know how I managed to get out of there. I don't know how I fought back, but somehow I did. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and bolted every window in the house. I didn't even think about how I got out, I just ran. I ran and kept running, not stopping until I was outside. And when I finally looked back, that creature was gone. But I could feel its presence. I knew it wasn't gone for good. It would be back. It was just waiting for me to make one wrong move. That was just the beginning. The thing is, it wasn't just coming after me anymore. It was after everyone I knew. It wasn't content with haunting my apartment, it started showing up at the homes of people I had spoken to about the store. People who knew what had happened, who knew about the curse. They all started having the same experiences I had, scratching at the walls, things moving when no one was there, shadows in the corners of their vision. And worst of all, they started seeing it, the Wendigo. I didn't want to go back to the store. I didn't want to face that thing again. But I knew I had to. Every day I stayed away, the curse spread. People were starting to go missing, disappearing from the area, never to be heard from again. I had no choice but to return, to face the truth head-on. The Wendigo had marked me. And now, it was marking everyone I had ever come in contact with. It was feeding off our fear, our confusion, and there was nothing I could do to stop it, not yet. I tried to prepare. I went back to the store, armed with everything I could find, salt, herbs, anything that might help weaken the curse. But when I stepped inside, I realized something. The store wasn't the same anymore. It was darker. The air was thicker, heavier. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in on me. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, and the footsteps, pacing in the aisles, just beyond my sight. I knew I wasn't alone. I tried to keep my composure, but every step felt like a weight on my chest. I knew that whatever had been unleashed in that store had grown stronger, more dangerous. The Wendigo was no longer hiding in the shadows, it was right there, in the store, waiting for me. But it wasn't just me it was after anymore. It was after all of us. And if I didn't find a way to stop it soon, it was going to consume everything in its path. I didn't know how much longer I could keep running. I didn't know how much more I could take. The more I resisted, the more I tried to put the pieces together, the more I felt the Wendigo's presence pressing in on me from all sides. It was as if the store had become a trap, a twisted, living thing that was feeding off my fear, feeding off my every move. It was no longer just a place, it was alive. And every step I took in there brought me closer to something far worse than death. It felt like the store itself was drawing me in, like it was built to keep me here, to break me down. That night, I finally made up my mind. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide. I had spent too much time trying to understand it, trying to find a way to fight back, but every second I wasted brought the Wendigo closer. I had to confront it head-on, with everything I had. The question was, what was everything I had? I didn't have a magic weapon. I didn't have some secret knowledge that would turn the tide in my favor. All I had were the same tools everyone had before me, fear, desperation, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of luck. But luck didn't feel like something I could rely on anymore. This thing, this monster, this curse, wasn't something you could just stumble into defeating. It was methodical. It was ancient. And it was powerful. I grabbed everything I could, the salt, the herbs, the old charms I had gathered from that occult friend, and anything else I thought might help. But most importantly, I brought my determination. I knew what had to be done. I had to destroy the Wendigo's heart, find it and end it. But I also knew that in order to do that, I had to get to the deepest, darkest part of the store. The place where no one dared to go. The part of the store where the Wendigo had been feeding for years. The store was different that night. It felt heavier, more oppressive. Every step I took inside made the air thicker. The lights flickered above me, casting long, sinister shadows along the aisles. The walls seemed to stretch and shift. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, like the voices of lost souls. And I could feel it, the Wendigo was close. I could feel its eyes on me, its cold, inhuman stare just out of reach. It was waiting. Watching. Hungry. I knew that it wouldn't just let me waltz in and destroy it. I had no illusions about that. I had to fight, and I had to be prepared. I reached the back of the store, where the employees' break room used to be. I had to go further than that. The very walls of the store seemed to twist in protest as I made my way to the old maintenance area, the place where things went wrong. Where things changed. The air was colder now. The walls seemed to hum with a malevolent energy. I could feel the pressure mounting, as if the store itself was trying to suffocate me. It was as though the Wendigo wasn't just a creature, it was the very soul of the store. It was part of the structure now, a cursed entity that had fused with its surroundings. And that's when I saw it. The creature. Standing in the center of the maintenance room. The Wendigo. Its body was even more distorted than before, its limbs bent at unnatural angles, its skin stretched too thin over its skeletal frame. The hunger in its eyes was undeniable. It was waiting. Waiting for me to make the first move. And I knew if I hesitated for even a second, I wouldn't make it out alive. I stepped forward. It snarled, the sound like nails scraping against metal, and it lunged. I barely had time to react. I threw the salt at it, knowing that it was supposed to weaken its power. For a moment, it stopped, recoiling as if the salt burned its skin. But that moment was all it took. The creature hissed, its eyes narrowing in fury. It wasn't just a wild animal, it was intelligent, it could think, and it was learning how to fight back. It came at me again, this time faster. Its claws slashed the air, missing me by mere inches. I ducked, stumbling back, and that's when I saw it, the heart. It was beating, pulsing, hidden in the center of the store's maintenance room, covered in shadows, just beneath the floorboards. I could see the dark, sticky mass, throbbing with unnatural life. The heart of the Wendigo. The source of everything. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the iron rod I had found earlier, a crude, but sturdy weapon, and slammed it into the floor. I had to destroy it. I had to end it. With every ounce of strength I had left, I drove the rod into the heart. The Wendigo screamed, an inhuman, terrifying sound that rattled the walls of the store. The air went cold. The lights flickered violently. The store groaned, as if it were alive, as if it were dying. But the Wendigo wasn't done. The thing shrieked, its eyes burning with rage as it lunged at me once more. This time, I didn't move fast enough. Its claws ripped through my jacket, grazing my arm. I cried out in pain but kept pushing, kept fighting. I slammed the rod deeper into the heart, pushing with all my remaining strength. The creature bucked, its limbs flailing wildly, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. And then, finally, it stopped. The store grew silent. The oppressive weight in the air lifted. I could feel the Wendigo's presence vanish, like it was being sucked away into the shadows. The heartbeat of the creature faded, its pulse slowing, until it was just a faint echo in the back of my mind. The store, the curse, was starting to crumble. It was over. But I didn't know if I had won, or if I'd just made it angry enough to find a new way to finish what it started. I don't know if I'll ever truly escape it. Even now, as I tell this story, I can still hear the whispers. I can still feel the chill of the Wendigo's presence. Maybe it's just in my head. Maybe I'm just too far gone. But I can tell you this, if you ever find yourself in Charlie's department store, run. Run as fast as you can. Because whatever's waiting inside isn't just a monster, it's something much worse. It's a curse. And once you step into that store, you're never truly free. It's been months since that night. Months since I thought I'd ended it all. But the truth is, it hasn't really ended. I left the store, but the store, it hasn't let me leave. Not fully. There are nights when I can't shake the feeling that I'm still there. That I'm still walking down those darkened aisles, hearing the soft whispers just out of reach. The sound of something, someone, scratching at the walls. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me. Or maybe it's something much worse. I tried to go back to my life. I tried to forget. But the nightmares came every night, relentless and vivid. I'd wake up, drenched in sweat, convinced I could still hear the creak of the store's floorboards beneath my feet. My friends, the ones I thought I had saved, started acting strange. They wouldn't talk to me the same way anymore. They wouldn't even look me in the eye. I don't know if they were afraid of me or afraid of what I'd seen. One of them, Tim, the guy I had confided in, he disappeared. One day he was just gone. No trace. No sign. No explanation. The police said there was nothing unusual. But I knew better. I knew what had happened. I knew the store had claimed him, just like it had tried to claim me. There was no other explanation. No other reason for someone to vanish like that. And the worst part is, I wasn't even surprised. I don't know how many more people the Wendigo is after. I don't know if it's still out there, waiting for someone else to walk into Charlie's department store. Maybe it's still feeding off people's fear, drawing them in with the promise of a bargain, a hidden treasure. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who'll walk in and walk out just fine. Or maybe it's already too late for you. You'll never know until it's too late. But you don't have to believe me. Maybe you think this is just a story, something made up to get you to listen, to keep you on the edge of your seat. Maybe you think I'm just another person who let fear get the better of them. Maybe you think I'm crazy. And I hope, for your sake, that I am. I hope this is just a figment of my imagination. But if you've ever walked into a department store and felt like something was off, something watching you, I wouldn't take the chance. I wouldn't step foot into any store that feels like it's waiting for you. Because if the Wendigo is real, if Charlie's department store is real, then I'm telling you right now, it's out there. And if it's looking for you, you might not get out. But I can't stop you. You can do what you want. All I can do is share my story. All I can do is warn you. And I hope you listen. Because this, what I've told you, this is just the beginning. I can feel it. I can feel the Wendigo still lurking. Waiting. Watching. So if you think it's over, if you think you're safe, I'm telling you, you're not. And I don't think any of us ever will be again. Before I go, I need you to do something for me. If you're listening to this, if you've heard what I've said, I need you to remember this warning. Keep your distance from places like Charlie's. And if you see the signs, if you hear that scratching sound, or see something out of the corner of your eye that shouldn't be there, run. Don't try to reason with it. Don't try to solve the mystery. Just run. Trust me. Because there's something worse than dying in those walls. I wish I had known that before. I wish I hadn't stepped into that cursed store. But it's too late now. I'm part of it, in ways I can't even explain. And no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, the store will follow me. The Wendigo will follow me. It's not over. And it never will be. But you can be different. You can choose to walk away. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't go looking for trouble. Because in the end, it's not just about surviving. It's about keeping yourself untouched. And that's something that Charlie's department store can never give you. So stay safe, stay smart, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. And if you want to hear more stories like this, more true tales of terror, of things you can't even begin to comprehend, don't forget to subscribe. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. You never know what's waiting for you in the shadows. See you next time, if I'm still here.